These are the stories of 10 of the greatest paintings in the world. I'm Andrew Marr. Art, not politics, is the great passion of my life. For me, it gets to the heart of what it is to be human. In galleries across the globe, there are great paintings, works made with almost supernatural skill, fierce passion, and extraordinary brain power. Now I want to tell stories behind some of the most iconic images in history, pictures like Leonardo's Mona Lisa, Van Gogh's Sunflowers, and Turner's Fighting Temeraire, paintings that represent the pinnacle of what people can do with paint and bristles.
He created a brand new way of depicting the world. The colours would fizz and pop on the surface.
It was like you could touch these people. It was like the portrait could speak to you.
Behind every picture, there is a story. I'm going to peel back the layers to find out more about the lives of their creators and the worlds they came from.
There was something about this middle-class Florentine housewife that intrigued him.
Why are these the paintings we all know and love? How were they created? And what makes them the greatest paintings in the world? The National Gallery in London is a treasure trove of more than 2,000 paintings. Some of these canvases make us feel patriotic or devout. Others fill us with horror. But there's one particular painting hanging on these walls which has caused blood pressures to rise in private and in public ever since it was first made nearly 400 years ago. It's Diego Velázquez's Rokeby Venus. It shows the mythological goddess of love, Venus, reclining very much at her leisure, gazing into a mirror held by her son, Cupid. The Rokeby Venus, it got the name a little more than 200 years ago in honor of its last private owner. What is really good art? Really good art, I would say, is art that has a physical effect on the viewer. So your heart rate goes up, you feel goosebumps at the back of your neck, the hairs on the back of your neck go up. You have a physical, emotional reaction to what you're seeing, and it might be fear or horror or whatever. In this case, it's certainly a very, very strong emotional reaction. You watch people watching this picture, and they stop and they gasp, and you can tell they are emotionally affected. The subtle magic of this particular Venus is all about watching and feeling. We look at her looking at a reflection of herself, or perhaps is she watching us standing in the gallery? When it was made, this kind of image was outlawed, forbidden, and certainly never to be seen in public. And then many, many years later, when it was already hanging on these walls, it was subjected to a ferocious physical attack. And the scars are still visible even today if you look hard enough. The story of how this simple-looking painting has triggered so many different and powerful responses is itself quite a tale. And it's one that begins with unlikely origins in that glittering era when Spain dominated the world.
The Spanish Golden Age was an extraordinary time in European history. Spain was an empire. Spanish territories extended beyond Iberia to Italy, to Northern Europe, and to the Americas.
It's conquest, colonization, expansion, and trade. They have an unbelievable amount of money, silver and gold, coming from the New World that could pay for the arts and, the patronage of arts.
It was into this world of massive wealth and huge opportunity that Velázquez was born in 1599 in Seville.
He came from quite a large family, one of 6 children, very educated. He was very talented from a very, very early age. And when he was aged 11, he went and studied art as an apprentice to the local artist.
The city was famed for its flourishing art scene, and the young Velázquez's new mentor and future father-in-law, Francisco Pacheco, was an influential figure across Seville. Although, as these two paintings show, the first of a merchant couple by Pacheco, and the second one of Pacheco by Velázquez, it didn't take long for the young man to surpass his rather wooden master, a talent that would culminate in the Rokeby Venus.
Velázquez is a unique artist, so he's often seen as being astonishing illusionism. His pictures look real, but they're not.
He didn't follow what every other artist was doing. He liked to use loose handling of paint. He used to use long brushes, for example, which was very radical at the time, but it gave him that flick that he wanted, that sort of impressionistic flick. He had this ability to keep paint looking fresh, as though it was still wet, like double cream. You know, there's parts of it that you feel as though you want to just go up and lick. They look so luscious.
He was already a technically astonishing painter when he left Pacheco to set up in his own studio and accept commissions when he was just 18 years old.
We don't know much about his personality, but he was driven, he was ambitious, he was talented, he was loved by everybody, by all his patrons.
And also his subject matter was unconventional. He liked to use real people that he knew and was familiar with. And he would go to the taverns and he would draw and paint the people there.
He actually had a passion for reality, a passion for textures, a passion for the things that were around him.
By his early 20s, Velázquez was the prime painter of Seville. And if you look at those early paintings, it's clear that he was obsessed by the real. They're paintings of the stink and the dust of the streets. He captured ordinary, everyday life with remarkable verve and energy. But the deeply ambitious man who'd paint the Rokeby Venus wanted, above all else, to paint the extraordinary. His opportunity finally came in 1623, when his subjects would quite definitely be keeping their clothes on. Velázquez was summoned to Madrid to paint the portrait of the new young king, Philip IV, and this was a huge risk. Do it really well, and what follows? Money, obviously, but also fortune and reputation. Bog it up, however, and it is instant humiliation, immediate failure, and skulking back to the shadows for the rest of your dibbity-dabbity painterly life. The National Gallery's Rokeby Venus is a jewel from the Spanish Golden Age. It's the work of Diego Velázquez, one of the most precocious, ambitious and brilliant painters the world has seen. I think the wonderful thing about Velázquez as a painter is the way he just loads his brush with a bit of paint and uses no more than he actually absolutely needs. It's an extraordinary self-confidence in his painting. The brushwork is quite loose. The edges of Venus's body are almost impossible to pinpoint. They're the opposite of the very hard drawing of the Renaissance you get so often. And so if you look at the little strip of cloth being held by the Cupid over the mirror, there's just tiny little flickers of paint, tiny little bits of white and pink, almost no paint there at all, and certainly it's not delicately painted in because he didn't need to. He gave the impression. This is remarkably modern painting. It almost feels like an instinct he was born with, but Velázquez would need more than that to make a successful career in 17th century Spain. From the time he first stepped into an artist's studio, aged about 11, it was clear that Velázquez had real talent, and he didn't have to wait very long into his maturity for his first big break. Because in 1623, aged just 24, he was summoned to Madrid to paint the custard-faced, slack-jawed, girlishly lipped and intensely vain king. The 18-year-old Philip IV had been on the throne for a couple of years, but he was already a prolific patron to the few artists permitted to loiter around his court. One of them, Rodrigo de Villandrando, painted this portrait of him just before he became king. If Velázquez could nail this all-or-nothing commission, he'd be set up for life.
The two most important patrons In Spain, during the 17th century, were the church and the court. One always hoped for a royal commission. This is what most artists strove to achieve, to be invited to Madrid to paint for the king.
It was a dream come true for Velázquez. His subject, however, was about as challenging as could be.
I think it may have been difficult for Velázquez to paint a flattering portrait of Philip IV.
They say of the king that he only ever smiled 3 times in his whole life, and that he was very inward, kept himself to himself. If he was out at a public affair, very often people would do a double take because he was so still they thought it was a statue.
After weeks of working and no doubt taking a mighty deep breath, he unveiled his portrait to the wary king.
Philip was absolutely impressed. He said it was extraordinary, that it was amazing, that it was lifelike, and nobody ever painted like he did.
It was an amazing portrait. To see him in a painting as though he's human and actually got blood in his veins was something quite extraordinary.
He was so flattered, and he wanted to have Velázquez as the only painter who portrayed himself and his family.
For a man still only 24 years old, this was a remarkable rise to the heights of his profession. Velázquez immediately left Seville and set up shop at the king's lavish Madrid court.
Life inside the royal palace for Velázquez was amazing. He had his own studio, he had medical cover, he got a wage, food, lodgings. He was invited to be even wardrobe master to the royal family, decorator to the palace. He travelled around and bought works of art for the palace. He was treated as though he was royalty himself.
He particularly became King Philip's friend. Philip was very stiff to everybody else and courtly. He made this persona, but with Velázquez, he was very relaxed.
Velázquez's new patron was a rich king who loved him. Surely here was an artist who could now paint whatever he wanted, including a classical nude, as all recent great artists had done. Absolutely not. Why? Because this was the heyday of the infamous Spanish Inquisition.
Its purpose was to combat heresy and to maintain Catholic orthodoxy.
Founded in 1478, this was the most formidable force in the Spanish Empire. Religious fundamentalists, secret police, torturers, judges, juries, and executioners in a single organization.
It was extremely zealous. The Inquisition meted out dreadful tortures, the rack, or pouring gallons of water down people's throats, all in order to get them to confess to crimes that they maybe or maybe did not commit.
The Inquisition was absolutely feared in Spain. It created a climate of terror. It created that was the most terrible thing.
The Inquisition's tentacles reached into all areas of life, from everyday moral decisions to the standards of high art.
According to the rules of the Spanish Inquisition, producing images of female nudes was considered indecorous.
They were considered something that may provoke unwanted sex or even rape. So the power of the painting was more than just the paint. If you were found to have any of these paintings, you would be expelled from Spain. And of course, the paintings would have been destroyed.
To make things a little more complicated, his father-in-law, Francisco Pacheco, was in charge of assessing paintings on behalf of the Inquisition. And so it's easy to see for the time being why Velázquez didn't stray far from the palace. Besides, limited subject matter wasn't going to curb his vision.
As a court painter to the king, he was very close to the royal family. So he painted not only the King of Spain, but also the Queen and their children, and also dwarfs and jesters and other members of the Spanish royal household. What Velázquez brought to his portraiture was a heightened sense of realism. He was able to breathe life into his subjects and his sitters, and he was able to convey the illusion that what one was looking at was not just a painted likeness, but an actual living presence.
It was so real. It was so, lifelike. It was like you could touch these people. It was like the portrait could speak to you. It was like a direct connection because of the way he depicted them.
And it's this dedicated, hard-boiled realism which makes all his painting, and this canvas in particular, so remarkable. If there's one thing we know about Velázquez, is again and again and again, is an almost shocking directness, a realism. You see dirty feet, you see distended bellies, you see wine bottles dripping with water. Always it's the material and the real. And I think you see it again in the flesh of the Venus here. She is unquestionably, undoubtedly, a real living human being. There is blood coursing just below that skin. It was to be more than 25 years before he'd get the chance to paint his Venus. That window of opportunity finally opened in 1649, when the king permitted the now 49-year-old painter to pack his easel and brushes and head for Italy.
Velázquez went to Italy in order to learn from Italian artists, from Renaissance artists, and also from his contemporaries.
Also to just have more experience outside the court that was very restrictive. He wanted to explore new subjects, which were not the royal family, and in Italy he could do this.
This journey to the heart of Rome was the chance to fulfill his greatest creative ambition, to paint a nude Venus in the classical tradition. But he still had to take on other commissions, and they didn't come much bigger than the one from the Vatican.
He painted a portrait of Pope Innocent X. Velázquez was very audacious, and he adds a layer of realism here in his portrayal of the Pope. If you look at the face, it's incredibly naturalistic in the way in which he portrays his expression, not idealizing his appearance, because he had a very prominent nose, and also portraying him almost with a scowl. And it's thought that when the Pope laid eyes on this painting for the first time, he exclaimed, "È troppo vero," it's too real, it's too true.
Away from the suffocating constraints of life in Spain, here was finally the opportunity for which he'd waited most of his life. Velázquez squared his shoulders and began the Rokeby Venus. Now, there are no records which tell us exactly where Velázquez was when he began work on the Rokeby Venus. But when you look at what he'd have seen in Italy, it's not hard to see where his inspiration may have come from. Here, for instance, is the sleeping hermaphrodite, or the Borghese hermaphrodite. It's actually an ancient classical statue which had been excavated. And it shows a woman lying in a very similar attitude to the Rokeby Venus, and we know that Velázquez took a bronze cast of this back with him to Madrid, so it clearly meant quite a lot to him. And then here we have two examples of the most blatant, full frontal nudes done up till then in Western art. This is Giorgione's Sleeping Venus, now sometimes attributed to Titian, and she's absolutely full frontal. And here, finally, is the very famous Venus of Urbino, painting definitely by Titian, and as it were, the reflection of the Rokeby Venus from the front rather than the back. In this case, Venus is full awake, and she's looking at us with a very frank expression indeed. And what we have to remember is that these are images that Velázquez could not possibly have seen in Madrid. They would have been forbidden. He had to see them in Rome. We will never know for sure who his model was or how long he took to capture her. But what we do know is that Velázquez's painting took the traditional nude portrait into a new dimension. And for such a radical, substantial change, he used the very lightest of touches.
It's a very soft painting, very few colours in the image. It's really only pinks, greys and a bit of blue.
If you get up close to that painting, it's very difficult to distinguish one brush mark from another. which gives it this lovely sort of pearly quality. He's really fascinated by the whiteness or the paleness of her flesh. And he obviously deliberately uses, perhaps rather provocatively, the black sheet to enhance that sense of paleness. So it's quite a sexy picture.
But it's impossible to believe that this was just an erotic exercise for the painter. There is enigma and subtlety in this painting. It adds up to much more than the sum of its parts.
I mean, it's a really puzzling picture. It's deliberately ambiguous. It's unusual at the time in that he's presenting the nude from behind. Usually the nude was painted reclining, but facing the spectator.
But here she gazes back at the spectator via a mirror.
If you look at the reflection in the mirror doesn't quite add up, so it's not really a reflection of Venus. First of all, the face in the mirror is much older than Venus's, so that might be a way of saying nothing lasts forever, everything is temporary, and everything ages and gets uglier and drops south.
And if you actually look at the face of the Venus, she's got this sort of slight blush and quite a petite face, whereas the face in the mirror is much larger, it's blurred, and it's looking out at the spectator. It's sometimes described as the Venus effect, but the proportions seem to be all over the place, which adds to the mystery.
It's not especially clear whom she's looking at. And this is an open question. He deliberately leaves it open. He deliberately leaves it ambiguous. Is she looking at the spectator? Is she gazing at her own reflection?
The mirror is key to this image, front and center. It's the focal point of the canvas. But more than that, from here, Venus can see exactly who's looking at her. Velázquez made a painting that's really all about how we look at it, the feelings we have in response to his subject. Titian's nudes are often described as being unrealistically curvy, but Velázquez's Venus was frank. This is a real woman. You take the models and you add the Velázquez touch, material, direct, earthy, frank, blatant, and you get something that had never happened in quite this way in Western art before. Velázquez loved his time in Italy, the free and easy ways of Italian life. Unfortunately for him, his year in the cultural sun couldn't last forever. King Philip IV was desperate for his return, so in early 1651, Velázquez finally headed back to Madrid. But what would he do with his newly painted Venus, a canvas that could get him into serious trouble with the Spanish Inquisition? He rolled her up and took the Rokeby Venus back to Madrid, back home. Venus undraped in the lion's den. Risky. So why would Velázquez take such a gamble with his own personal safety for this image? This remarkable 17th century masterpiece, popularly known as the Rokeby Venus, is by Diego Velázquez. Velázquez was the great painter of the Spanish Golden Age. There was nobody who came within a country mile of Velázquez's ambition, the cheeky, fluid directness of his brush, and the sheer force of his intellect. And yet, amongst all those wonderful portraits, the mysterious court scenes, the battle paintings, the Rokeby Venus stands out alone. Because nudes were outlawed by the Spanish Inquisition, Velázquez had painted her in Italy, but then he took the monumental gamble of returning to Madrid with his canvas. Why on earth did he take the risk? Well, he seems to have had a buyer lined up for it, and remarkably, the evidence is still there in black and white at Madrid's Casa de Alba archive. Dr. Mar Doval is a local Velázquez scholar.
This is the inventory written in 1651, the 1st of June, on the belongings of the Marquis of Elite. There are many entries, as you can see, and each number is possessions of the Marquis, and in this case, paintings. And the one important for us is this one, number 222. And in this case, it's very well described. It says, una pintura en lienzo, a painting on canvas, that's important, of a nude woman lying on clothes Pintada de espaldas, painted from the back, leaning on her right arm and looking at the mirror, held by the boy. De la mano de Velázquez, by the hand of Velázquez. We know that that picture was in that collection. And we know that picture was painted by Velázquez.
So who was the Marquess of Elitse? Well, he was a well-known nobleman and a flamboyant roue. He did know a lot about art, and he knew what he liked.
He was an eccentric guy, an eccentric collector of women, an eccentric collector of art. He was one of the most important collectors in Spain.
He was a very powerful man. He was about 30 years younger than Velázquez, and he was very charismatic. He was apparently very ugly.
The Marquis, yeah, he wasn't a very handsome man, but he enjoyed life, and he liked women very much. Women and art. And he had a very impressive collection of art. Paintings by Titians, Velázquez, from Raphael, and he wanted to have the best painters. And Velázquez was the king's painter.
He now had a prized new painting, but where could he display it without falling foul of the Inquisition's vice squad? Like many secrets, the answer is locked behind closed doors. Literally. The Spanish elite's solution for keeping their forbidden pleasures away from disapproving eyes were called salas reservadas.
They were started by Philip II, who had a huge collection of nude paintings, and they were secret rooms within the palace or in the houses of nobility where men who collected art could have their own secret nude paintings.
Philip IV increased the collection of nudes, and he would retire there after the siesta, after eating.
At the time, nude paintings of women would have been considered like top-shelf porn, you know, for male amusement, male pleasure.
These paintings were covered with curtains who were drawn if women were supposed to go there, like the Queen, for instance. But if men were there, obviously it was to be delighted by these nudes.
All of the rich, powerful men would have had these hidden secret chambers. And that's where they would retire for the evening, gone for hours or 2 minutes, depending.
And although it knew about the secret rooms, the Inquisition was checkmated, unable to get a grip on the fashion for secret salons, even if its clerical police suspected this was getting out of hand.
Most of the high clergy possessed these paintings called indecent pictures. So they couldn't really expel bishops or cardinals or even the king, from that matter. So there was a kind of double standards of doing public morality and personal taste.
His Venus had a fervent new admirer, but Velázquez returned to his fully clothed subjects at the royal court. The ideas he explored in the Rokeby Venus would reappear in his later works, most clearly in Las Meninas, one of his final portraits of the royal family.
The Rokeby Venus may be seen as a kind of dry run precursor to Las Meninas because the two have in common the mirror and the way in which he manipulates the reflection in the mirror and open up the possibilities for interpreting what we see in the painting. Where is the Venus's gaze directed, and where are the king and queen?
And in what is, on the face of it, an intimate family portrait, Velázquez has painted himself into the heart of the composition. He has, in effect, photobombed his employers.
He was implying that he was part of the family and introducing just reflections of the king and his wife in the background of the painting. You see someone dress up as a nobleman in the act of painting. It's a kind of symbolism. It's a kind of metaphor that he finally achieved what he wanted.
4 years after finishing this painting, 61-year-old Velázquez died and was buried in a church which once stood in this square.
After Velázquez's death, he really does become one of the most famous Spanish artists who ever lived.
Centuries later, he was still held in the highest esteem. Picasso, Manet, Goya, they all looked back to Velázquez and said that he was the painter's painter, he was the greatest of them all. No one has surpassed him.
And a painting by the greatest of them all would always find a home. So it was, at the end of the 18th century, Venus became the property of another member of the political elite, a newly appointed Prime Minister, Manuel de Godoy.
Manuel Godoy had a collection of nudes following the tradition of the hidden displays.
The Inquisition was still actively hunting out immoral painting, but that threat didn't stop Godoy commissioning Francisco Goya to paint a nude for his collection. While he was inspired by Velázquez and his remarkable Venus, what Goya painted, known as the Maja, was altogether more risque.
There is no Cupid, there is no mirrors, there is nothing of that kind. The body is frontal in the Goya's Maja, and Velázquez is from the back. She's actually looking at us. She's engaging with the viewer directly and is inviting the viewer to enjoy her. So the eroticism in this is much clearer and less concealed.
It's said that Godoy owned Goya's naked Maja and had the Rokeby Venus together in one room. And that would have created a huge stir had people known.
The unpopular Godoy's enemies rejoiced in 1808 when, following a tip-off, his private booty room was raided. The Rokeby Venus was exposed to the hostile gaze of the Spanish Inquisition, and over the following years, Godoy was hauled into court.
He had to stand trial in front of the Inquisition, and he was asked why he had these paintings, and he said, well, he was an art lover, and he also said that they were following in the great traditions of other great artists like Tintoretto and Titian, but it didn't do any good.
The Inquisition forced him to name the artist behind the image far more scandalous than the Rokeby Venus, the naked Maja, and so Goya found himself dragged in to be questioned.
He tried to legitimize the portrayal of his nude by comparing it to the Rokeby Venus. He defended the quality and the fantastic composition and colors that Velázquez used at that time for him to emulate.
Goya turned around and said, well, no, actually, Velázquez did it before me, and Velázquez was the greatest painter, and I'm just following in his footsteps.
It was a clever defense. Velázquez was now beyond reproach, a Spanish hero for the ages who could do no wrong.
If he could paint a nude, then Goya could get away with it. And that was basically how he escaped from serious punishment by the Inquisition.
Velázquez's Venus had effectively saved Goya from potential exile. So the next chapter of this masterpiece's story is all the more surprising. Set as it is in Yorkshire. After he was disgraced, Godoy's collection was broken up and Venus was sold to another politician, John Morritt, MP of Rokeby Park, near Barnard Castle.
So the Rokeby Venus got her anglicized name because of Rokeby Park, where it ended up in the 19th century.
And it stays there on through different generations of the family, apparently hung above the chimney piece, so that when the connoisseurs came, they could steal a glance up at it, while ladies could avert their eyes away from the painting.
She might have changed country, ending up in a very different part of Europe from where she'd first started. But once again, the Rokeby Venus was hidden behind an elegant private door to be peeped at only by the house guests of Rokeby Park. She was like a courtesan, a kept woman, hidden behind high private walls, no peeking by the plebs. The Rokeby Venus hung there for nearly a century before the Morritt family were forced to sell her to pay a massive tax bill in 1905. Art dealers purchased the Rokeby Venus and then put her straight back on the market with a huge asking price of £45,000, which would be £5.5 million in today's money. They were going to have to shop around for a buyer. But what would happen next to the Rokeby Venus? More politics and a nasty surprise. For the first 250 years of the Rokeby Venus's life, this enigmatic painting had been locked behind closed doors. In 1905, this extraordinary piece was put up for sale, and in a shameless attempt to enthuse as many buyers as possible, the Rokeby Venus was sent off on her very first public tour. Suddenly, the painting found itself displayed all over the country: Manchester, Liverpool, Edinburgh.
It's extraordinary because it goes from behind a sealed room where it's only for a select pair of male eyes into the public arena where everybody can come and see it for free. And they're amazed by it. And not just the subject matter, but also the painting technique.
Not everyone likes the painting. Some people think she's not a very attractive woman. No, she's ugly. She's too thin, she's too scrawny. But I think all this debate, just garners interest.
So when the news broke that it might be sold abroad, there was a public outcry to save the Venus for Britain.
The National Art Collection Fund launched a campaign to save it for the nation, knowing full well that the Treasury is not going to act and put up the funds to acquire the painting. So lots of people put in subscriptions.
The British public wanted to keep it here because it was such an astounding painting. It's part of a great, important history, and we wanted it to be seen.
The cause seemed pretty hopeless, with the sums raised falling short, but then help came from an unexpected and royal direction.
The King, Edward VII, meets the shortfall by offering a donation and also a loan, which enables the Art Collection Fund to acquire the painting for the nation in 1906. It becomes the nation's Venus.
And the King wanted this national treasure saved so it could be admired by everyone.
It goes on public display for the first time in 1906 at the National Gallery.
People flocked to the National Gallery to see her. A legend had built up about this artist, this Spanish artist from the 17th century, and people queued to see her.
The men used to like to go and see it. First of all, they could get a sneak at some flesh, and the women used to like to go and see it because they felt empowered by it. I'm turning my back on you blokes.
For the next decade, all the millions of people who came to look at her were met by the Rokeby Venus's unchanging gaze. But the world beyond her eyeline was changing. The suffragette women's movement was at its height, fighting for the right to vote and against countless inequalities and prejudices.
There was no television, there was no internet. If a man wanted to look at a naked woman and he didn't have a naked woman waiting for him at home, he could go to an art gallery and look at paintings of naked women. It's not surprising that the suffragettes got infuriated by this objectification of the naked woman, this deification of naked women in art galleries, whilst ignoring the realities and the real privations of women there in front of them in real life.
On March the 10th, 1914, the day after her leader Emmeline Pankhurst had been arrested in Glasgow, a former art student and militant suffragette, Mary Richardson, decided it was time to strike another blow for the cause.
She sort of plots her campaign very carefully. She decides to go into the National Gallery on one of the free days when there'll be lots of people around to witness her performing the act. She goes to the room and there are policemen seated in front of the Rokeby Venus.
What she had concealed about her person was some form of meat cleaver.
And she pretends to sort of sketch in a notebook, goes away to another gallery, come back, and she seizes her opportunity.
She went up to the Rokeby Venus,
takes the axe out of her bag, smashes the glass,
and she slashed at it with the cleaver.
7 times. It's really quite a sort of violent, quite a shocking act before people pounce upon her.
The guards were kind of racing around. Some of them slipped over, and by the time she was finally arrested, quite a lot of damage had been done to the painting. The attack on the Rokeby Venus got into all the newspapers, and the newspapers soon dubbed her Mary Slasher Richardson.
Her justification of it was that she wanted to attack this picture which everyone was admiring. All this fuss about a fictitious and unreal woman, whereas a real woman in our history who's making a real meaning from impact, Emmeline Pankhurst, is in prison and she's suffering.
After Mary Richardson was sentenced to 6 months in Holloway Prison, the National Gallery set to work repairing the damaged canvas. Even today, more than 100 years later, it remains a painting which divides opinion.
What is the power of the Rokeby Venus? I think the power is in what we don't see, what is left to the viewer's imagination. So again, this is a definition of a great artist here. Velázquez doesn't show us everything.
The Rokeby Venus remains a very controversial painting. Artists love it, particularly artists who paint and study the nude. It's a wonderful exercise in nude painting.
This voluptuous, simple-looking painting of a naked woman is a much, much cleverer picture than it first appears. I think it's not just a testament to Velázquez's talent and ambition, but above all, to his honesty. This is a painter who is prepared to portray gormless monarchs and vicious popes as they really were. And similarly, when he turns his attention to lust, he goes the extra mile. So yes, he has stripped Venus absolutely naked, but look at her face. Look at that expression of cold, withering contempt as she stares back at the male viewer. He has also stripped naked the male gaze, the voyeurism, the lust. I wonder if the patrons who bought this picture and enjoyed it in private even noticed. That is smart. That is painting. Next time, this colossal gallery doesn't just contain the most important painting in Dutch history, it was actually built around it. There are exhilarating highs.
Rembrandt in those days was really like a superstar.
And crippling lows.
In spite of the fame Rembrandt achieved, he was buried in a pauper's grave.
Of Rembrandt's iconic Night Watch.